If there are two prevailing themes to Part 2, it's vengeance and forgiveness. While there was a growing warmth in seeing the connection between Joel and Ellie bloom, of overcoming the odds of an apocalypse, that flame has been doused with water. The story of the sequel has been divisive among fans, chiefly when it comes at the expense of someone who made the original story so meaningful to set it in motion. It took the community off guard, even if it gave added meaning to the gameplay improvements that portray Ellie far more vicious than Joel ever was. She has a firm goal and will venture into hell to fulfill it. It takes the action still formula and maxes the dial, expanding the world and our opportunities to enact our wrath. And just when things are coming to an apex, when the person we've been pouring our resentment into is within reach, the game takes an unsuspecting turn, recontextualizing everything. Is it an experience worth partaking, especially on PS5 at 60 FPS? Let's explore the question. The game opens with the guitar being restored by Joel, one of the game's greatest symbols, while admitting to his brother what a vaccine would have done to Ellie, what he's done to prevent the reality. In 2013, this was the biggest thing I kept asking myself: what would be the aftermath of his actions, especially if Ellie found out? Advance the timeline 4 years. They had both settled down in Jackson, Wyoming. She is now 19. Her relationship with Joel one of friction. It isn't immediately made explicit what's up, but it is something the game explores. It often jumps into different timelines and perspectives, not taking long to demonstrate it with someone new, Abby. At first, I kept wondering why jump to her. I want to see what's up with Joel and Ellie. It quickly becomes looser why Naughty Dog would take the approach, a reason that would see the writers vocally denounced for, fans feeling it had betrayed the 7-year anticipation for the sequel and ruining the franchise in their mind. Having played The Last of Us Part 1 recently, I'm amazed by the boldness and how it repeats the cycle of the first game, how a single loss can consume you. Whereas Joel gradually shed his humanity from the night of the outbreak, Ellie was born into a world where it had become the norm. And while Joel would reveal his softer nature, you don't get that from Ellie. Vengeance drives her, and she spares no one in pursuing it. She'll venture from Wyoming to Seattle, Washington, across a hellscape to kill Abby and crew. I can't help but be reminded of this scene from Part 1.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you. So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared.
Imagining the feeling what she had been robbed of. Akin to reaching the destination of the first game, I will look forward to Ellie reaching Abby. Seattle is a beautiful place, where we can see a clear evolution of detail and texture. The land is verdant and teeming in detail. There are buildings to explore, of course, but nature exerts a strong influence. Not merely for aesthetics either. Many areas are decorated in overgrowth. They can be used to conceal ourselves. It doesn't sound like anything worth noting, only it drastically alters the aggressiveness of stealth. Why wait for the enemy to stop looking your way to move up, when you could crouch or even crawl forward, or in rarer cases, submerge yourself in water for cover. What makes these improvements feel more organic is the scale of the environment. It feels like a real world. When you arrive in Seattle, you do so by horse. A good thing since our first stop is an expansive one, where you can wander to see what you'll find. Most of the game won't share in the size, but will in the sense of openness. The sound design is also excellent, giving a believable idea of place.
I'm gonna find you! Nice shot!
You can see the series has evolved. When you're swinging off a rope onto a monorail beam, crawling through gaps in a building, or once closer to the ocean, finding the streets inundated, needing a boat to weave in and around coursing rapids. These are clear areas of evolution, made possible by the framework of the first game. The technical details in the game's visuals, in conjunction with the tech used for facial animations and character performances. It's impressive how far the series was iterated in 7 years. One area that regresses, though, is the perceived seamlessness of the world. In the first game, many parts gave the idea of an adventure starting at A and ending at B. In The Last of Us Part 2, flashbacks alternate between most chapters, making gaps. A bit ironic since in these moments we spend time with Joel as a younger Ellie, the exact thing I know I wanted to see, building up to why their relationship became so strained. When it comes to Ellie, it's not something to mind, but when I get to someone else, it can become something I want to pass over. No matter who I be controlling though, the combat was something I never wanted to skip. I reveled in the gameplay of the first game, of entering rooms with a single bullet and shotgun shell, while needing to dispatch a squad of people or infected. Part 1 is oriented around stealth like Part 2, but I generally avoided it there, preferring to commence things by headshot. It created an addictive feedback loop of the situation becoming an action puzzle. When each enemy has a high chance of dropping ammo, headshots true, killed by a single shot, you feel triumphant emerging from a situation. Well, the sequel has refined the stealth just enough, allowing you to keep on the aggressive, becoming a pleasure to use. As mentioned, Ellie can wade through overgrowth to move in on the target, which she can enter by diving into it. The perspective can also be used to gain vantage, where you can rotate the camera freely. In fact, if she takes enough concussive force, she will be dropped to the ground, which isn't nearly as annoying as it sounds, unless you don't have a clear view. Then it is. Enemies will stop firing for a window, allowing you to align them into your crosshair. If circumstances call for melee, she can also dodge in the exchange with the enemy, a particular benefit against infected. She doesn't punch either, lashing away with her switchblade instead. That also means she can use it as a permanent shiv against clickers. Be in possession of a melee weapon, you'll end up with some crazy finishers. Enemies have clear tells when they're about to strike, so it becomes easy to fend assailants off, unless attacked in a group. At that point, you best rethink the strategy, or try to time your evasion amongst them. With a handful of new enemies that have been introduced, that can be easier said than done. Guard dogs that will sniff around for a scent, forcing you to contend with it and its master if found. Shamblers, a brood of an infected that uses acid to attack, a priority kill when featured. Seraphites or Scars, a religious cult that coordinates by whistle. First met by way of an arrow to the shoulder, you'll need to extract it, otherwise you will take chip damage to death. Among the humans are also elites, who are bigger and can endure more damage. Even if imposing in size, they are no less immune to the almighty headshot. And the final addition to The Last of Us Part 2, Seattle's Patient Zero, the Rat King, perhaps the game's best enemy and memorable fight. Whether in the midst of battle or out exploring, you'll appreciate the feel of doing so. Animations have been smoothened from 2013, where it feels very satisfying to control. Connecting a sprint to a crouch and into a gap feels fluid. Essentially, it ends up feeling like your actions are that, your actions. There are now multiple skill trees to unlock through training manuals to craft silencers, trap mines, or the most OP, explosive arrows, which can obliterate the body of the enemy, all of which can be upgraded. I'm sure at this point it's been illustrated how raw this game can be, how committed it is to its carnage. The first time I ever found myself saying holy shit was when I was flanked by an enemy, where I took aim with my shotgun, blasting their arm off. I couldn't help but reflect on Ellie from Left Behind, taking pictures in a photo booth, just how savage she has become. As the story of The Last of Us Part 2 unfolds, you'll see her be shaken by her actions, view the pointlessness of her revenge, of herself being lost. There is a greater theme at play by Naughty Dog, and right when you think Ellie is close to what she wants, the game takes a surprising turn. Up to that point, I wanted revenge exacted, so when the game pivots to Abby, it came as a shock. It takes place during the start of Ellie's arrival in Seattle, and if you were left thinking this whole time that the game has lacked the heart of the first, it surfaces with our supposed villain. Her sight starts in flashback, which immediately left me conflicted. The very thing Ellie seeks, Abby achieved, motivated and haunted by similar reasons. Due to Joel's actions, she enlisted as a soldier, which explains a few things, such as her physique. The girl trains. She has defined biceps, triceps, and deltoids. She has a gym where she is stationed. You could spot an NPC performing a bench press, and another one-arm row. Even if I wonder about her protein and calorie intake in an apocalypse, I give her props. She also comes across as affable, like when she gets embarrassed when her friend cuts in a cafeteria line.
Come on. So embarrassing.
When she was willing to wait at the end for burritos. Those sort of details project cool. Abby plays just like Ellie, but with muscle mass punches instead, which also means she would need to craft a shiv for a stealth takedown against a clicker. She has her own skill tree and weapons too. She'll end up wielding a flamethrower, a double-barrel shotgun that can have incendiary shells crafted for, and a crossbow. At some point, you end up joining up with someone by the name of Lev, a defector from a religious cult, Seraphites, sworn enemies of Abby's organization. What follows is an adventure that harkens back to the first game, where in the place of a surrogate father Joel became, Abby becomes a surrogate sister. Flashbacks are interspersed between chapters, but as I've intimated earlier, hers don't work for me. Due to my time with Ellie in the first game, and the chance to see more of Joel, I didn't mind. Whereas Abby, there aren't any gaps or things I want to see outside the here and now. It isn't helped by sections that feel drawn out, set in the same locations, or could have come across in conversations instead.
What's going on between you and your friend Owen?
Oh my god, Lev, now?
It seemed really awkward.
Just go!
I did, however, end up preferring my time with Abby, especially seeing her foster a relationship with Lev.
Come on,
Those were your fucking people.
you're my people.
That by the time their paths converge with Ellie's, you begin to view her as the villain. The way it unfolds will reinforce that revenge won't resolve trauma. The letting go is holding on. There is a final section to the game that has proven controversial by how it wraps things up. Personally, I'm fine with it, but I would say I prefer the plot and pacing of the first game, whereas the sequel, everything else. I do end up reminiscing about this game's events more though, of the distance one is willing to go and how sometimes it's a path that doesn't need to be trodden. The plot may be the only aspect of the game that's hard to recommend. Sometimes, all you want from a new game in a series is more of the same, but iterated just enough to feel fresh. You're still receiving a rich story, characters, etc., but it isn't the story I expected from part 1. The length of it is good at about 20 hours, that rarely feels so long. If you become a fan of the gameplay, it does become hard to put down. It makes me wish that the multiplayer that was in the works for the game had been finished, as much as I'm glad it wasn't, as it is something to look forward to as a future standalone. Playing on Survivor, it proved a fun challenge, with intelligently aggressive enemies. But so you're a fan of the finality of a higher difficulty, but hate being low on ammo, the game allows for your own custom challenge. Imagine dulling the enemy awareness where they just stand and think about what just ran past them, but hitting like a cinder block once the dimmer of a light bulb hits its max brightness. There are several factors to experiment with, so go holistic or granular. On PS4, The Last of Us Part 2 is one of the console's most defining games. It may have ran at 30 FPS, but I can't consider that a negative for what was on display. When I heard and saw the game running on PS5 at 60, to say it holds its ground against current PS5 games is an understatement. The game is that technically impressive. While I have caught a few stutters and pop-ups, it wasn't to a prominent degree. Without a doubt, it's the best way to enjoy the game. Even if the PS4 experience is nothing to scoff at. The Last of Us Part 2 offers enthralling gameplay and a remarkable sensory experience, but it also poses a conditional recommendation. The tale of the first game, while it had dark edges, had a heart at its center that made you root for Joel and Ellie to see their journey through. Part 2's pursuit of vengeance and question of forgiveness has a coldness, a savagery that will make many wonder what happened. I prefer the story of Part 1 overall, and do think the sequel could have trodden a different path. But there are story elements that are more salient in my mind because it was bold enough to take the course. I mentioned earlier that the guitar is one of the game's greatest symbols, something you could play throughout the journey. Does the notion of no longer being able to at all, or notes that once echoed rich, now thudding or no longer sound, strike a feeling? What if at the 11th hour, you had the epiphany that what you thought you wanted wasn't it at all? That in its pursuit there has been no gain, but loss. Under that lens, I can't escape a feeling of sadness, something to learn from. The work is powerful, but like in music or film, what I find worthy of praise may be hollow to you. The Last of Us Part 2 is a title that has divided its audience from launch, and I side with the party that liked the game. Thanks for watching. This comes as a bit of an aside, I didn't know where I can include it, but I do like that there's a detail that somebody's playing a PlayStation Vita, or was playing a PlayStation Vita, and the game was Hotline Miami, and that game is amazing. We'll see what results from that. But anyway, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. If you have any thoughts, a comment, and or if you found potential in me and my content, please subscribe. Everyone, have a good one.